If you've listened to my podcast episodes for a number of weeks now, you will know I admire and value people who put themselves out there and shoot the shot, as we say. And this is exactly what I can say about Parul Yadav. So Parul DM'd me a few months ago after she heard a couple of episodes of Decoding Confidence, asking if she could come along and be a guest on the show. She is someone who is fairly new in the world of PR and communication. She's been working in the industry for around 6 years, but oh my goodness, has she achieved some incredible things in those 6 years. She's the founder of North Wave Media, which is a relationship-led PR and integrated communications agency that works across Canada and the US. Her work spans across healthcare, tech, finance, consumer goods, and social impact. And she has brought that expertise to markets from Toronto all the way to Chicago, Phoenix, Denver, and beyond. As a young South Asian founder, inclusive storytelling isn't just a tagline for Parul. It's the whole point of her business. She has created spaces for diverse voices in leadership, media, and policy, and it's central to everything North Wave does. Outside of her work, she is an IABC member, a board director at her local Toronto Community Centre, and a mentor to emerging communications professionals. She lives by one belief that I think we could all stand to hear more often. Visibility matters, but only when it's built on substance. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation with Parul, and I really hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I loved recording it. Enjoy this episode. Hi, welcome to Decoding Confidence. I'm your host, Advita Patel, a confidence and influence coach. I'm going to be digging into what confidence actually looks like in the workplace. Not the fake it till you make it stuff, but the real deal. So whether you're navigating tricky stakeholder conversations, trying to get your voice heard in the boardroom, or you're just trying to figure out how to back yourself when the imposter syndrome kicks in, this is your space. I'll be talking to people who've been there, sharing practical tools you can actually use, and unpacking the myths that keep us second guessing ourselves. So Parul, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Decoding Confidence. Now, I shared in my introduction to our listeners that you have built a career in PR and communications and coaching at quite a young age. I didn't really start my career in PR and comms properly, I would say, until I was probably in my early 30s, which is just wild when I reflect back on my career. I always felt like I dabbled in it a little bit and I was trying to figure out my pathway, but you've been quite focused and committed to this career and what you wanted to achieve. But when you look back on everything you've achieved so far, was there a specific moment where you realized confidence, not just competence, was the thing that would define how far you went?
That's a really good question when it comes to competence versus confidence. Completely and honestly, it took me embarrassingly a long time to untangle those two because they're so intertwined, especially when you grow up in a culture that ties your worth closely to achievements. And especially early on, if something did feel difficult in my brain, I would just go straight in that mode. Oh, I just not might be good at it. This is just so new. So looking back, I feel like I was just too hard on myself. And I just think that a lot of that came up from growing around a constant comparison and that, the cousin who became the doctor or the friend's kid who got into that prestigious university or who got really good grades. And when everything around you is measured against someone else's worth, it is pretty difficult. And it becomes very easy to read that difficulty as deficiency instead of just being something new. So what actually helped me was really the exposure. I feel like practicing my craft and also just noticing that even the people that I put on the pedestal, let's say the leadership people or senior executives in the agency that I worked in, they were always Googling things midway as well, maybe in a client meeting, or they might not have that figured out straight away as well. So I remember just specifically sitting in that meeting early in my career and I was they were clearly improvising right on the call right there. And And it really helped me genuinely remember that, okay, everyone's human. It does happen. And that it gave me that permission to stop assuming. So I think that really helped me. And when something really just like felt hard, I do not let my brain jump right into the conclusions of like, okay, I will pause and ask those first to myself. And it just, if this is just unfamiliar or if this is complex, sure. But if it just needs more time than I have given it, I would work on that. And I think that small shift really helps me build that confidence and that competence. And then also just going from there to move things around and see how I can just grow more and be better at it.
It's so powerful what you just shared there. But I want to take you back right from when you started your career and explain to someone who may not have heard of you or who may not follow you, what led you into this world of PR and communications?
I would love to. And I say to everyone, it wasn't like one big cinematic moment at all. It was those small little things, like a bunch of small quiet realizations that built over time that, okay, like, I could not ignore them anymore. Like agency life was very different. I was like doing the work, delivering the results, and people were trusting me with real client relationships and decisions that actually mattered. But internally, I still just like felt I was just constantly catching up to some version of myself that everyone else seemed, they already see it, but I did not see that. And I remember just like sitting this one evening and being like on a client call, and it was pretty good. I felt proud about it. Instead of just feeling that, like that constant feeling that stayed with me, there was this strange uneasiness, I just sat there thinking, well, nothing is actually missing here. The work is solid. The client is happy. How do I actually feel like I'm not behind? And I think a lot of us who grew up in these immigrant households as well, that feeling gets handed to us early on. You grow up watching your parents work as twice as hard as any other regular person out there, and it's still like not being to seem like capable. And somewhere along the way, you do observe that idea that competence alone is like never quite enough to feel secure. And even when the external, markers are there, the trust, the internal gap, I feel like you're still like bracing on that or for someone to find that gap. So I do realize that competence has already been built, but I just wanted that external validation, I feel. And that skill set was there, the track record was there, but my ability, my permission, I would say, that someone else would give me, I was just waiting on that. And I think when I stopped waiting on that permission, that is when things started becoming easier for me. Like I was not writing someone else's story. It was my roadmap. I was building it all by myself. And I think just like eventually turning that into a reality and just moving from a place of more confidence rather than being like, okay, I don't belong in this room at all, but giving myself that permission. And then just going on that route of just choosing a career where I am first flexible and then I'm choosing the work that resonates with me rather than someone handing that off to me. I think that really wrote my story till now. And I think everyone who saw that on the paper, it was like a perfect life that I had when I was like working that regular corporate agency career. But I just felt deep down that it wasn't for me. And I wanted something that resonated on another level and how I want to, I would say, make an impact in the industry myself.
That's really good in terms of how you kind of took control of your destiny. You mentioned there, growing up in an immigrant house, there's an expectation put onto our shoulders, I think, as children of immigrant parents, who have sacrificed their world to make sure that their children have a better life. And that pressure comes onto our shoulders, right? And I've spoken very openly with my parents about this and the expectation placed on our shoulders. Either first-born immigrants in the country that the parents moved to, or you moved across when you were younger. The confidence, I suppose, that you don't follow the traditional path that your parents may have set up for you, or your cousins or community members have, and there's no secret, or maybe it's a secret for those who are not familiar with the Asian culture, but there's a huge amount of pressure put onto your shoulders as children of immigrants to be a certain somebody and earn a certain amount for the sacrifices that your parents made for you.
Right.
And for you to choose to go into an industry that isn't well known in our community,
Yes.
And what I mean by our community is like the South Asian community, and explaining to your parents that actually I'm not going to go down the traditional road of dentistry, medicine, pharmaceuticals, engineering, that they kind of deemed as acceptable careers.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go down with your family, bearing in mind that, your parents did move to Canada to give you a better life and your siblings a better life? What did that even feel like when you were explaining to your parents that actually that kind of work doesn't bring me the level of joy or fulfillment I would want?
Right.
I want to go down this path of PR and communications.
And that's so funny. They wanted me to do one before I actually went down the all like PR and comms route. They were like, okay, let's get you into law. So that's another story. But I think it just runs so deep down, especially for women, and more so for women of color, specifically South Asian women navigating or moving through spaces that were not ready or really, really like built for us in like mine. And there's like this subtle, almost like invisible conditioning to just wait and wait until you're validated, wait until you're ready, maybe, and a lot of like South Asian households, they do that conditioning really early at homes as well. So, there is this idea that they say, and then there's also this term in Hindi, and I'm sure you might know like log kya kahenge, which is basically what people will say. That subtle quietly like sits with you behind so many of your regular or your life decisions as well. So that stability is praised. Risk is of course questioned, like why are you doing this? And going out on your own, especially as a young woman, I feel like it often just like gets met with that concern of like, again, what are gonna people say, or how are you gonna manage out there? So I remember this specific stretch where I had already built a really strong freelance like client base while having a full-time career on the side. I had the proof, I had the results, and I just knew on some level like I could not turn this into something bigger unless I don't let go of this full-time stability that I'm holding on to. And I kept on waiting for that right decision, waiting for my father to, of course, like be like, okay, let's go ahead. You are pretty good at what you do. And then waiting for that external confirmation from family, from friends, from siblings. And it was a long time until I finally decided that whatever they would say, again, like that is not a roadmap that they're handing on to me. I still have to go and figure that out by myself, being first in the family to be able to take that entrepreneurship route. And then secondly, I did not grow up around entrepreneurs at all. Like I grew up around people who valued that safety and that stability and that paycheck for a good reason, which also I'm not disregarding at all. But of course, nothing will come until I put that in action. So because nobody was waiting to hand that permission to me. So again, like this shifted, everything was, again, asking sharper questions to myself, like what should I do right now instead of like, let's just forget someone is watching, someone is validating, someone is evaluating me, and then just like taking that step, that first step. So that clarity was really uncomfortable, but just like moving, building that structure, quitting my job, and finally going all in has let myself also explore, make mistakes, and also learn from them. And eventually parents did come around after they saw what I am doing. I'm feeling good at it. I'm just happy with what I have put out there. But again, it was initially, there were a lot of questions and asks. I wasn't expecting that for sure. So it is pretty common.
Yeah. I mean, it is scary doing something so different from the norm of
Yeah.
what the community or the society that we're brought up in are used to.
Mhm.
And even outside of the kind of minority cultures, the dominant cultures, even PR and communications has a very different expectation about what that role is. There isn't, in the media, it's sold as something very different to what the reality is. So parents, even if you told them you work in public relations, they're probably looking at some film or a program that they may have watched where there's this kind of like sexy looking PR woman who's kind of, working with
Right.
all these celebrities on the red carpets, and that's their
Yeah.
representation of what PR is, and trying to explain actually is so much more than what you've seen and what you've heard. And it's
100%.
also that fear of not succeeding that can play a big part. You never want to let your parents down because you're fully
Mhm.
aware of how much they have sacrificed for you. And that fear of getting things wrong and being, bringing shame onto the family, what you just said there before, what will other people say? That's a big deal
Yeah.
in the communities that we're in. One of the things I explore in the book that I have written is how the fear of getting things wrong quietly shapes how we show up in ourselves. And the idea is that, that we don't often show up as our genuine self because we're so fearful of what
Right.
other people think about us or what other people may say about us. So we end up kind of masking our real identity to not only fit into the dominant cultures that we support or the clients that we serve, but also to make sure that we're not pushing ourselves too much in case we do fail and bring shame
Yeah.
onto the family. As somebody who also coaches other people in the work that you do, how common is this fear in your experience, and how do you help people kind of move through the fear that they may have that might be holding them back in achieving their dreams and objectives?
Mm-hmm. And again, like I always say that this is so more common that people are willing to admit out loud. I feel like everyone does go through that fear of getting wrong, and it shows up in really tiny, almost invisible like ways. Maybe writing an email 5 times before you actually send it out. Or, that idea that quite kind of sits with you before you even like speak it in like a room full of people, and you never do it just because you feel like, okay, the hesitation before actually putting something in your head, and it wouldn't like seem right in front of those people that I'm speaking to. So, none of it looks dramatic from the outside, but it's just so exhausting from the inside. And when you're putting so much of yourself into it. So I feel like for a lot of women of color, I also like work with in terms of supporting their small businesses, there's this extra layer to there as well. There's this quite pressure of just feeling like you're representing more than just yourself in that room. And if I get this wrong, it is just not my mistake. It somehow just reflects on whether someone likes me or, if they think I belong here. And I have felt that exact pressure early on, very aware, that I just might be the only South Asian woman in that room, or the youngest one as well. And feeling like I had to be just like flawless just to be seen as that's the simply competent or like perfect person out there. And what I have understood through working with so many people on exactly that this fear is just not even about the task itself. It's just about that imagined audience in your head and that imagined level of scrutiny that you put yourself through that almost never matches the reality. We assume that people are just like paying so much more attention to us, or that they're judging us so much harder than they would. And I feel like they're just living in their own lives, and they're pretty much doing the same for themselves too, a lot of them. So what I actually do encourage people to is like shift that focus instead of obsessing over those, like how you would like be received out there, focus on what actually needs to be said or done. And clarity honestly helps really cut through that fear as well. So if I'm like being articulated in what I have to put out there, or my messaging, I'm just being honest, and not like overthinking that much. And we all struggle with that as well. I feel like that really comes as more natural, and that thing that actually builds confidence the fastest is just like doing that thing you have been avoiding. So maybe not thinking about, just planning that perfect version of yourself and just like showing up just so that you can be more authentic. And sometimes I think it's like surviving that outcome and then seeing how it went, and rather than just like thinking, oh, how I would make that perfect in terms of like someone else's image. So all of that I feel like is like fear of like getting it wrong, but then also like just taking the first step and going from there, because we all overthink it. It exists in everyone out there, and especially as like a woman of color, I think it just like hits us even more harder.
Yeah, I think it's, in my experience, it's people who are marginalized, right? So whether you are a woman of color or whether you are one of very few females in a very male dominated industry, or you're in an environment where everybody's had a private education and you came from a public education and it's a little bit uncomfortable and you don't speak the same tone or same style, all of that, as you are clearly articulated, can play a big part in how we feel about ourselves. And then we kind of push ourselves into perfectionism, because we think that if we give 100% more than everybody else in the room, then we're going to be taken just as seriously, and seeing that we are capable and we're not just getting the job because of who we are or our protected characteristic. We're getting the job because we're credible. But you always have to put in that extra additional effort just to be seen. And that does drive perfectionism. And I have seen many folks who have stopped themselves from progressing because they're so busy trying to be perfect. And that doesn't always get us the results that we need. In fact, it can really hold us back, as you have said. So focusing on the why, Like,
Yeah.
why am I here? Stopping the limited belief that we give ourselves sometimes, and making up this narrative that we have in our head that so many people are going to say this and this is
Mhm.
may what happen. We kind of catastrophize the kind of what may happen if we take a risk. We may
Yeah.
be shamed. But I always say to folks that I work with, well, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, this is your story, not theirs. And
Right.
if somebody cares that much, then they're not someone that you should really be bothered about.
Mhm.
People who really want you to succeed will support you and will never judge you. And I
Yeah.
think if we remember that about who we are and what we're there to do, you'll see yourself moving forward even quicker.
Yes.
Which kind of
Beautiful.
takes us into quiet confidence. So I've got an issue with how confidence is often defined. And I think many of us have been conditioned to believe that if you're loud and extroverted and center of attention all of the time, then you are definitely more capable of leadership, and because you're demonstrating more confidence and credibility and competence over somebody who may be more reflective and more steady and a little bit more quieter in how they may respond to certain situations. And I've been on my own little micro mission, Parul, to kind of demonstrate that's not true. It's not true that those who are loud and extroverted are more confident. And in fact, in my research for the book, it often meant those who were loud and extroverted generally were masking their own insecurities and were just boosting themselves to get over the task, and felt more discomfort than those who are more quiet and reflective. So we do tend to equate confidence with being loud and visible and always having something to say. But like I said, I believe the quietest people often have the biggest impact because they're so good at active listening and observing and paying attention and saying what needs to be said in the moment rather than just saying things for the sake of saying it. Where are you on that scale? Like, what do you think about that? Is that your observations in your career, especially in PR and comms, right? We do get encouraged to be more visible and say a lot and be this kind of vibrancy with our clients. But have you seen that? Is that something that you agree with or disagree with? Where do you sit on that?
I'm pretty much on the same boat. And I do sit firmly in that quiet confidence now as well. And honestly, I feel like it has been one of the most freeing shifts I honestly have done for myself. Early in my career, again, genuinely believed confidence had to be this loud or this calm person that I show up with, and speaking often or being assertive in every room, always having that answer ready, even when I have not actually figured it out potentially or whole in a whole way. I was performing a version of, I would say, confidence that was also pretty exhausting for myself and was not even fully mine. So it was also not even a model I grew up watching closely either. A lot of women in my family have led things quietly. But it was, again, a lot of consistency through showing up, in a reliable way, and also just not through being the loudest in the room either. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that was its own kind of strength as well. And now I just I see it so differently. It is more about that clarity. It is about exactly, when to speak, and also just as importantly when not to, because when you are working in these more, I would say, North American environments or any sort of Western workplaces out there, your presence have to be I feel like it has to be pretty loud out there, because there's so many people who are speaking without actually articulating, just so that they can be relevant, first of all, in the front of the managers or the senior leadership folks out there. And then just trying to put their face or name out there. And if you're not doing that, it often comes down to that, first of all, maybe looking at your reviews, or the management comes up to you and be like, hey, is there something wrong about it? So I think in my work, especially with clients that I now support, who come to me wanting for that, first of all, personal brand or visibility, I actively just pull them away from that performative confidence. We are not just going all in. We do not start with how you sound more confident. We do start with, first of all, what you stand for, what is your demographics or the audiences that you are trying to target, and what do you actually want people to leave, them with? What do you want them to kind of feel about you when you first when they first see you, or they first talk to you? And that really helps in clearly articulating that shift, and also just communicating with more intention. And I think intention is the word right here, because again, just like speaking up and all of those things. I was taught a lot of that early in my career, again, like with the mentorship or the seniors that I had in my life, like, okay, like speak up, ask any questions, which is also a good thing to do. But again, you have to also sit in that quiet confidence first and just like take that all in before you actually articulate something out there, rather than being like, oh, I'll just like make something up. And a lot of people do that. And it never sat right with me. So I think just like being really clear, intentional with your purpose, and then also speaking in a way that is just not, you're not trying to be assertive in the room, but more about that actually like trying to articulate yourself and being more clear with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what confidence is. Confidence is trusting your ability to be able to handle whatever life throws at you.
Mhm.
And that's what it stands for, is a Latin word for with trust. But yet we seem to have identified it with being loud and extroverted. And I do want to say that, you know, if you are listening and you are on the scale of being more louder and extroverted, that's absolutely fine, by the way. But what I don't like is this whole fake it till you make it analogy that goes out there, that you must pretend and be someone that you're not to succeed. And that just isn't true and shouldn't be true. And we need to kind of fight against that a little bit and be authentic and genuine in who we are, and align with that integrity in our values and stand for what we believe in, because that is what's going to give you the courage to push yourself even when you're feeling uncomfortable, because confidence follows action. And if we don't take action, we're never going to build confidence. And that's something that we have to really understand about ourselves. So when you said, you know, think about what that looks like for you and how you put yourself out there, and what good visibility means, it's also looking and observing on how people trust you, and
Right.
looking at the signals and the red flags and all of that kind of stuff. Like, are you getting invited into conversations? Are you getting the clients that you want? Are you able to influence and demonstrate impact? And if you are really being honest with yourself and you're observing and you're going, actually, no, then that's when this red flag goes up to go, well, what do I need to do to adjust and adapt? Not break or change your entire personality, but what do I need to do to adjust and adapt so I can influence and demonstrate impact? And there will be simple, practical, pragmatic fixes that you can do. But I think a lot of folks get so hung up on comparison
Yeah.
and try to mimic other people who are doing well in their eyes, that they end up being someone that they are not. And that is something that I think you have to be careful about. And I've definitely fallen into the comparison trap where I've mimicked other people's behaviors because I've seen their success. But what it's meant for me is that I've ended up being someone that I don't feel comfortable being. And that's the fear that, again, that we spoke about earlier, that can set in.
Mhm.
So that's what I just wanted to give people an opportunity to think about. What does trust mean for them? Because it is the foundation of everything that we do. We spoke a little bit just earlier about your identity as a first generation Indian Canadian woman who operates in global spaces. How much of your leadership journey has been about unlearning what confidence is supposed to look like versus what it actually does look like and feels like for you?
Mhm. That's like a huge part of my leadership journey till now as well. And great question again about how do I genuinely just unlearn what confidence is supposed to look like before I could even start figuring out or what it actually looks like and feels for me, first of all, that feeling. So growing up and then entering these professional spaces as a first generation Indian Canadian, the model of confidence I kept seeing was very like Western, very extroverted, very direct, very loud in the room. We just chatted about that as well. And it was that specific script. And for a long time, I just did not see myself in it all. On top of that, it's also a lot of Asian households, as you would know, especially for women, confidence can quietly just be coded as arrogance. Like, okay, you're being just too direct, you're too sure of yourself, or you're too vocal. It can get you labeled as like not knowing your place, even within your own community. So you are navigating two very different sets of expectations right here. The professional world is telling you to speak up, and the cultural world is telling you to quiet down or telling you to just stay humble, stay modest, do not take up too much space. So for a while, I just tried to adapt to that Western model. I tried being more assertive in ways that did not feel really natural to me. And also like just filling up these silences the way that I saw other people, fill them. Again, like replicating that model. Okay, maybe they are successful. That's how I go on that path and then that route. And I was also performing a version of leadership that when I look back right now, it was also borrowed from someone else rather than built from my own understanding or my own values and ethos. So over time, again, through a lot of trial, a lot of error, also a lot of discomfort and honest reflection on myself, I did realize that I do not need to copy that version of confidence or that comparison that I've been trying to put myself through. I could define that on my own. And that is, again, a lot of confidence building and a lot of owning your own story.
Yeah, I think that's, again, I think the theme of today's conversation is about trying to uncover who you really are. Because as soon as you do that, as you said earlier, and I've said this a lot as well, the freedom
Yeah.
you experience is really difficult to articulate in words. And people often ask me like, oh, well, how do you know when you're confident? How do you know when you've built your self-esteem? And how do you know, like, how do you feel? And I always say to them that the only way I can describe it is like a sense of freedom. It's like a big heavy weight has lifted off your shoulders and you're not performing for anybody apart from doing what you love doing. And you come to a place in your world where it doesn't really matter what people think about you. There will be people who listen to this podcast episode and won't find it enjoyable or find it a bit uncomfortable. And before that used to really knock me of like, oh, what else can I do? I need to make it even better. Now I'm like, look, there'll be people in the camp who love it and get a lot from it. And there'll be people who don't. And that's okay. There's so much more out there for different types of personalities and people. You don't have to like everybody and you don't have to be likable to everyone. It's making sure that you're respectful, you're kind, you're generous, you're supportive. That's my whole ethos in life for me and my values. Everyone's values will be very different. But I think, the kind of tip, I should say, and the pragmatic advice is taking time to find out and uncovering who you are. And it doesn't really matter what age you are either, in my opinion, because people will say the older you get, the more confident you get. And that's true to an extent, but it's not always effective or real for a lot either. But the biggest change is being trusting with yourself and being okay with who you are, the good bits and the bad bits, and accepting that there are some areas that are not your best, but there are also some areas that are your genius. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay that other people like or dislike me. Like, I'm good. And that takes a lot to get to that point. So on the final question, Parul, if someone right now is listening who is talented, capable, but is still waiting for permission or waiting till they're qualified enough to step up, what is your message to them?
That's amazing. And honestly, really, again, a good question. And I'm trying to also, I would say, I have been living with this constant thought of like being ready. And as I previously said about that validation, about just like, I think people are quietly waiting for that feeling and it does not arrive on schedule, right? You have to bring that by yourself. And readiness is not some milestone you arrive at and then move from one place to total certainty. It develops after you take action. And I always keep on saying that word on that, just relying more on that word action, that confidence people are waiting to feel before they it started, and actually the result of having actually started. So if you're capable or you're sitting there waiting, the truth is that you're probably already more prepared than you think. And if you're someone navigating this while you're also carrying the weight of being the first in your family or just doing something a not very non-traditional route, or the person who looks like you in the room, I would want you to know that the weight is real, and then that there's a proof that you're doing something that has not been modeled before. So again, taking on that word action and actually just like going all in and not waiting for the permission, the validation, because the longer you wait for that certainty that was never going to show up, the longer you delay that exact moment that you have been waiting for, or that dream that you have been trying to fulfill for a long time. So it is my honest challenge to anyone in that spot, like just, start. And the confidence will build, and it will build through that movement, and not before that. Before that whole idea in your head, you have to put it out there. So be in the motion and not in the stillness, and then go from there, and then figure it out. That would be my honest statement.
I agree with you. And I will always say to folks who are feeling a bit stuck and think they need another qualification to prove their value is do one brave thing every day.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be a big thing. It could be the smallest thing. It could be sending an email that you've been frightened to send to somebody that you really want to work with, or, DMing somebody on LinkedIn that you want to have a virtual coffee with,
Right.
or asking for a ticket to an event that you can't afford, but you really want to be there.
Mhm.
These bold, brave movements will really help you move into your next phase of confidence. And you said it before, and I said it earlier, confidence follows action.
Yes.
The movement, the action, believing in yourself and advocating for yourself. Self advocacy is so underrated. We always wait for other people to advocate or champion us or celebrate us. And we have to do more of it. You said it earlier before, Parul, you kind of get conditioned not
Mhm.
to show off, not to throw so much out there that you might get the evil eye,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff you get told. And in the British culture, and I think it's similar to Canadian culture actually, is humble, right? Be humble. Be
Right.
humble. Don't show off too much. Don't be putting yourself out there too much. It's really uncouth and it's not great. And I'm always advocating folks to be like, put yourself out there and celebrate yourself.
Right.
Because if you don't celebrate you, who will?
Exactly.
Don't wait for other people. And I think if you're listening to this episode today and you are feeling a bit lost or a bit uncertain and you're just feeling the kind of heaviness of your day, then I want you to remember that there is hope out there
Mhm.
and it's within your control. And the only thing we can control in our life really is our reaction to things that happen and how we trust ourselves to deal with anything that kind of comes our way.
Beautiful.
So I hope that's a great takeaway, a fantastic advice and conversations from you, Parul. So thank you so much for sharing that. If people want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
100%. Thank you so much, Advita. First of all, amazing conversation. And I'm so, so happy I was able to get my story out there and my personal journey. So thank you again for creating this platform, especially as a young person. It really means a lot who's, just gone into the entrepreneurship route. And then I would love to connect, of course, to the listeners out there. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. It is my full name, Parul Yadav. And then also I do have my website, which is www.northwavemedia.org. And there's, again, more contact information in there, my email, my phone number as well. So,
Amazing.
yeah, would love to connect.
Thank you. And we'll share all of that in the show notes as well, so you can connect with Parul directly as well. Make sure the website and the LinkedIn info is shared. And if you want to be a future guest on Decoding Confidence, then please do drop me an email at hello@decodingconfidence.com. Or of course, you can EM me on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on TikTok. I'm on all the channels, so you'll easily find me under my name, Advita Patel. But thank you for joining us today. And thank you again, Parul, for your time. And I will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.